And we are live. So, hey guys, welcome to the RegiCast. I'm your host, Reginald. Joining me is Chris or AsuraPsych. Hopefully, I pronounced that right.
That's right.
So, Chris, how's it going, man?
It's going pretty good. Just a pretty average day. I'm happy to be here.
Thank you, awesome. So let's go ahead and start. I'm gonna start with apparently Dave calls these my bylaws. So these are my bylaws, guys. First of all, I'm not Kendrick. I'm not Benjamin. Okay. I'm not gonna ask some random, hey, what's your FI like? I'm not gonna do that. Okay. I'm gonna ask what I want to ask. But first of all, Chris has his own YouTube channels. So forget them. Go check out AsuraPsych's YouTube channel. Is exceptional. Just literally type what you see there in YouTube. He also has a website. I believe it's AsuraPsych.com, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep, I have the domain name. Yep.
There you go. So go ahead and check that out. We'll talk a little bit more about what he's up to over there, but go ahead and do that. Okay. Go ahead and consume. Okay. Next. So the goal of the RegiCast is to have really enjoyable and meaningful conversations. That's it, guys. Like, don't make this too complicated. If this is an enjoyable and meaningful conversation, that's we won. Okay. With that being said, everyone that I've talked to, I've currently sourced from the objective personality community, although, and we'll get into this, AsuraPsych, he doesn't necessarily consider himself like an objective personality, like typologist, but I met him through there, right? So if you want to learn more about objective personality, we'll talk a little bit around it, but honestly, check out their website, their YouTube channel. We will be using some of that terminology, so I have some links in the description to help you guys out. Next, okay, so guys, I'm trying to tell you guys, especially all of you guys who are disrespectful, come join us in playing Super Smash Brothers. Okay, we got a Facebook group, Shirtless Sephiroth. Guys, okay, come get bodied. All right, my friend code is in my about page. Okay, also message me so I can get you a part of the Facebook group. We're gonna host a tournament, live stream a tournament for the OP community, 3rd or 4th week of March. Okay, and then also join us at our game night. Okay, so I don't know if you guys know about Jackbox party games, Quiplash, those type of fun games. We're going to actually host that live as well. That's going to be March 13th. But guys, I need you guys to RSVP, so please message me, fill out the Google form, let me know what's going on so we can get prepared for you. March 13th from 12 to 3 p.m. Eastern, and then from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. Eastern. Okay, come join us. All right, last thing, and then we'll get started. There is a live chat. Okay, if you want, feel free to message, and then Chris, actually, I forgot to mention, if you do ever want to check out the live chat, feel free to, you see where there's private chat and comments.
Yeah.
Just hit comments, exactly. So if you guys have any questions, comments for Chris, feel free to throw it in there, and then if we address it, if it's relevant to the conversation, we'll throw it up on the screen. Okay, that is it. So Chris, welcome, man.
Hi, glad to be here.
Awesome. Yeah, so let's get started. As is tradition, okay, let's start with our first impressions. I don't even need to talk about how you already know I'm spamming the OP community with all my posts. Okay, yeah. So some people like that, some people don't. But I'd love to hear what your first impression of me was, and then I'll share mine.
Yeah, so I think you initially reached out to me after I posted a comment somewhere on the Objective Personality Facebook page. My first kind of idea, the very first thing I thought about when I saw your YouTube channel, is this seems like a relatively entrepreneurial type person. Someone who has a lot of things that he might like to do and kind of wants to achieve some great things. You seem like you're relatively dedicated and, given your type, focused, or given your way of processing information, focused. So I think it's really cool to see what you're doing here, and you're attempting to start up your own little, podcast and maybe grow it into something. So
nice, awesome. Yeah. So, and it's funny because I think the comments you left, I don't remember what the exact post was about, but it was definitely in the objective personality community. But I mean, you shared some really kind of pointed critiques, right? I in fact, actually, I do remember. So there was a friend of mine who put a post up. Who put a post up saying, "Hey, when Dave and Shan say double-blind testing, they actually mean inter-rater reliability, right?" And so Chris jumped in and he was like, "Well, absolutely." And then he shared some more, and I think we're going to get into some of those additional critiques. But I was like, oh wow, this is very thorough, you know. So my first impression, that's why I reached out. I was like, oh my goodness, this guy is clearly not just like going along, you know, with OP. He has his own viewpoint. He's being respectful of the system, but he has his own viewpoint. He has his own pushback. So, and then I think from there, I did check out your YouTube channel. I was like, okay, I mean, you're definitely doing your thing, right? Your YouTube channel and your website. So yeah, I think my first impression from that alone, and then also talking with you was, I mean, super calm, but very like almost, I guess the word is intentional. Like you know what you're doing. Every word you say, especially in that post, had intent. It's like, look, I want you to understand X, Y, Z, and you know, I thought it was delivered really well. So I know it was my ramble, but that was my first impression. Yeah.
I think it might be helpful to give maybe, because I assume a lot of people who watch your stuff are from the objective personality community, maybe some idea as to like how I land on that or why I'm part of the community.
Yeah.
And so some of you may know me from my YouTube channel. I'm a certified MBTI practitioner. I'm also a graduate psychology student. I'm currently involved in formal research. I'm a part of the objective personality Facebook page, even though I'm not a supporter of the system, because I try to stay in touch with the larger type communities, because I think it's good to see the ideas that everyone has, and maybe, you know, just kind of compare and contrast what they're doing to what other people are doing, and how that kind of fits into the original mesh of kind of Jungian ideas. So I try to keep up to date with the other communities, even if I'm not directly part of them.
Yeah. So thank you. So let's actually do this. I'm gonna do it in a very SI way. I mean, I don't care if you're MBTI or OP. It's gonna be SI. Okay.
Okay.
So let's start chronologically, right? So let's actually start with, okay, you started with MBTI. First of all, how did you even get into typology?
Okay, so the first time I ever took an MBTI test was we took one of the formal ones. I was in high school. I was 17 or 18 in a health class. Didn't think much of it. Scored as INTJ. And then, it was like whatever. A few years later, I stumbled across it again, excuse me. And I just thought it was a little more interesting that time around. I had been out of high school for a few years, was paying my own bills, these types of things. You get that different perspective of being an adult and personality in general after you've been on your own for a little bit. And then it started to interest me more. And I thought, wow, this is really interesting. So I spent some time in personality typology communities. I was a senior moderator over on Personality Cafe for about 2 years. And I, was very active in their forums and talked type a lot. And then I kind of just started my YouTube channel one day because I had just some ideas that I wanted to present. I was like, I think maybe some people are seeing these things wrong, and maybe I can help explain that. And as that interest began to grow, I was like, I wonder if I could turn this into a career. So that's when I decided in 2017 to go get certified as a practitioner, it's not a hard process. It's like $2,000 in a week-long course, where you have to go there. Well, you used to, I think in COVID, either way. So then I actually had a really interesting time there, and a really important thing in my life happened there, because the mentor, the woman who was running the class, a licensed child psychologist, she pulled me aside on the very last day, and she said, look, I know what you're doing here is really interesting, and I know I can tell you're passionate about this stuff, but no one's going to listen to you in these types of things if you don't have any formal credentials or you're not licensed. So you should probably go to college and get a degree, because you could talk with people about personality if you want, but if you want to make the change that you want to make, consider going to get licensed. And the next week I was in college. I didn't even think about it. I was like, she's absolutely right. I want to do more with my life. And then went back to college. 2 years later, I had my degree. I rushed through, did year-round classes, more overtime classes, and rushed through to get my degree. And now I'm a graduate student attempting to get into a PhD program, but they're very competitive.
Nice.
So sorry for the long rant there.
No. I was expecting it. Okay, assuming your type is what it is. Okay, really good. So based on that trajectory, right, and that path, so that helps me understand MBTI and kind of your YouTube channel and things like that. How did you get into OP? I think I know the answer to this, but just to share it.
Yeah. So I stumbled across OP probably 3 or 4 years ago, because Dave used to be Dave Superpowers, right? Mm-hmm. Before he was objective personality. And I had always seen his stuff around on YouTube, and I thought it was kind of interesting. And I noticed that one day he just had a shift, and I was like, oh, I think this is the same guy. So I just followed it just to see what they were doing. And one day I found the Facebook community. I've been a part of it a little over a year. I originally joined because I did the interview with Benjamin over on his YouTube channel, and then he showed me the Facebook group. And every now and then I just kind of jump in and say something if I think maybe someone is having trouble understanding a function or something that I think really stands out as maybe it's not the best way to look at something. I try to interject. But other than that, I don't really post too much over there.
Got you. Okay. Well, I mean, what did you like initially about objective personality? Like, at least enough to grab your attention.
So I thought some of the ideas that the things that they were seeing and the way that they were explaining them were good ways to kind of interpret Jung in some scenarios. Now, I have a lot of things that I don't think are very good. And I think that they had some really cool, interesting ideas, like the example of, I believe, OP calls them deciders, or Jungian types would call them judging types, how they tend to be people-focused and are more going to struggle more with people, whereas the observers tend to be thing-focused and struggle or get frustrated more with things. And I was like, oh, that's a really unique observation, actually. I hadn't thought of it in those terms. So every now and then I'll stumble across one of these types of ideas that they have where I'm like, okay, I see what they're seeing here and why that's important and why they're pointing that out. But conceptually and as an entire system, I do have quite a few gripes with what they're doing.
Yeah, no problem. So do you mind jumping right into that?
That's up to you. If you want to talk about other things first, or we can go right into that. Up to you.
So let me look at my notes. Okay. I think the way we want to kind of go about it, let's start with OP just to jump in, right? Okay. Let's do the critiques, pros and cons, and then we'll just kind of talk about that. Then we'll transition to like your more like MBTI focused, like your YouTube channel, just MBTI in general. And maybe even, actually fucking OE doing it last minute. Let's go ahead and do OP and do a compare and contrast between OP and MBTI.
Okay.
Right? And then that would be a perfect segue to your stuff.
Okay. Great. Okay. So any launching point there or thing you want
to? So I would say, like your critiques. Because you've been mentioning, hey, I have quite a few gripes with this, or I've, a few concerns with the OP system. Yeah.
So, okay, the one thing that I think, well, there's a few things, but I think something that stands out when we're looking at objective personality and maybe some of its weaknesses is they definitely are not wrong when we talk about the idea that there could potentially be, say, for example, 512 types. Because in Jung's psychological types, he only has 8. And then he says, there's the potential for many more, which is why Briggs then did the 16. And the 16 were very natural evolutions of what kind of Jung was talking about. The issue I have with how objective personality has their 512 types, it's almost like they've expanded it really big and then solidified it in stone to a point where you're so specific in your personality type that there's no chance for variation or change throughout the life. And this is something that I disagree with when we're talking about an overall type. So I personally, when I look at, say, for example, an ENFP, I see that as a type with many sub-variations of how they can portray themselves depending on their point in life or where they are, depending on their mental health, how they've gone through life, these types of things. Okay. For example, this is why OP has jumpers or double introverted or double extroverted types. I would call this a developmental stage in a traditional Jungian view. Because Jung himself would say, I don't think it's necessarily a great idea for a type to be that introverted or that extroverted because they need that auxiliary function to act as a balancing point for their overall psyche. So that's kind of one of my big issues with the 512 type system is that it's so specific that you don't allow for variation. Now, imagine if you had like ENFP and then the subtypes of ENFP, and maybe you could find yourself at different points within their system, then I wouldn't have as much as a gripe with it. But the way they have it set up now is they're teaching you that you are this and there's no variation in that, and you shouldn't attempt to maybe like work on some of those other functions or become like a paragon version of yourself. I don't know the best way to say that, but
yeah. Do you mind if I ask any questions?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, so I guess so with that pushback specifically, would you prefer the system to basically say you can change types over time? Is that what I'm hearing?
So it's difficult because when we talk about changing types, that's why I don't like to think of them as other types, but more so a variation of a singular type. Okay. Because in the Jungian model, you don't switch types. If you're an ENFP, you're going to be an ENFP. Right. But the way I look at it, you could be an ENFP at a point where your first and third function are really kind of overactive at this point in your life. And you might even see that you're going to be facing a lot of issues because of that. And if you balance out with your auxiliary, then you might find you're more healthy. Or you might be at a point where you're just now learning about the issues of your repressed function and it's really dragging you down. And that could totally change how you're presenting yourself. And maybe you find that you're stuck in your second and fourth function and you're someone who you're not usually like. And I think that that's why it's better to have it as kind of like the umbrella singular type with these smaller ones under them.
Okay. I'm going to ask one follow-up question. Okay. And I'm going to have to set up a little bit to ask this, right?
That's fine.
So my understanding is that the reason Dave and Shan they expanded, I think they originally wanted 32 actually. Or actually, no, I think they originally wanted 16 actually. So when they first started attempting this inter-rater reliability test where they're trying to get the same type, they wanted the standard Myers-Briggs 16. But what they were saying was, over time, it actually made it much more likely that they would get the same type if they were more specific. So from a tracking standpoint, that's why they started expanding.
And that makes complete sense, because the more you narrow down something, the more easily you're going to be able to kind of repeatedly find results associated with that. The issue is that in terms of general psychological, self and how our minds work, we do have some variation, especially in how we're going to be developing these functions.
Okay. So I guess the question I have then is purely from a tracking standpoint, not from a self-growth standpoint. So ignoring their message about self-growth, purely as a tracking system of which, precisely how you developed your type as of this moment.
Yeah.
How do you feel about the system?
I think it could work in that sense. You could say this is where you are right now, and maybe if you developed a plan for that, but then you have to get into the idea of what do you think an optimal type looks like. And that's a difficult question, because it's not like every ENFP, for example, is going to have the best way to present themselves and their functions. All we can say when we look at it from a Jungian standpoint is that there's general guidelines to follow for mental health. Specifically, be aware of your repressed function. Don't try to become it. He always says if you try to become your repressed function or master it, you will fail every time. And your auxiliary function is the thing that you should be working on if you want to balance yourself, if you want to become a better, more healthy version of you. We're so obsessed with our dominant and blind to our fourth that the auxiliary acts as that healthy median between our dominant attitude. So as an introvert, that would be extroversion, or as an extrovert, it would be introversion. Because the repressed function, if we try to engage in that, it's just like, it's chaotic. And then the auxiliary function is, it's a little bit in the middle. There's some health to it. It also helps me communicate my needs and my ways of perceiving things.
Okay, really good. So speaking of critiques, so the next one, at least that I have on here, was you mentioned that the OP system, maybe not Dave and Shan specifically, but the OP system as of right now seems very dismissive of other typology systems. Do you mind elaborating on that?
Yeah, I think this is almost more of a personal gripe. Because from everything they say on every video they talk about, they're always trashing, MBTI has no validity. You can't see yourself. You can't understand yourself, these types of things. And I think that's really badly ironic coming from a system that doesn't follow the scientific method in any realistic way. They have a very pseudoscientific approach to research, and we could talk about more inter-rater reliability if you want. And as I mentioned again, I am involved in formal psychology research at this moment. I am someone who works in research and I'm planning to make a career out of this.
Okay.
So it's not that they're not doing things kind of scientifically. It's that they're picking one way of doing the science aspects and kind of ignoring everything else. So when we talk about inter-rater reliability, this is, again, the system that they use. They say, okay, we have two people who can agree on the same thing, and what they're seeing is they can agree that they're seeing the same thing. This doesn't matter if what they're seeing hasn't been defined properly, or if what they're seeing is not measured correctly. And the scale that the example that I think I used in that Facebook post was, imagine you have a scale that's 5 pounds off, and everybody gets on it. Everybody's going to find that they're going to see the same weight. Or, imagine you have a few people watching a single person get weighed. They're all going to see that the weight is that weight, but it's still going to be 5 pounds off because no one's checked the accuracy of the scale. Right. And that's the difference between reliability and scientific validity. If the construct is not valid and defined in a way that has been verified, then you're not really measuring anything scientific in any realistic way.
Mm-hmm.
And this is why I describe OP as kind of a Jenga tower of type. It's not that they don't have good ideas, and it's not that they're making great progress in certain things. It's that they have so many different constructs, like so many different constructs, and they're just pulling from the base and the foundation of type and putting these things on top. And it seems like to me, eventually, it's just going to crumble and fall because they're adding too much to it without verifying the initial foundations of it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, so this is a tangent. Okay.
Yeah.
So tangent would be based on that. So okay, so assuming it's this Jenga tower, like what, like in an ideal world, obviously no one's perfect, but in an ideal world, like what can they do to course correct? What can they do to get the blocks back to the foundation?
Well, I think I mentioned this. It's a long process when you're psychologically validating something. And that's actually one of the reasons, and we'll talk about this later, I think, is why I view type as more of a philosophy than a science. Mm-hmm. But the issue with things that you want to treat as close to a hard science as you can, which is already ridiculously hard with psychology, is that it's a pain. It's really difficult to verify a construct. And this is like, you can have a graduate student do his entire college thesis on the idea of like social anxiety and what it is, just like a general construct. So you have to start with the basics and the very foundations, and then run those vigorously and vehemently, and then get those either checked or kind of reviewed or agreed upon by a large enough amount of people or professionals within the field to be considered a reliable or valid construct, Okay. Typically, validity is in psychology, it's usually defined by people who are professionals within the field who come together and agree on things. So think of like a round table of all the best and brightest who usually come together, and they'll kind of review papers that people have done, the research that they've provided, and say, okay, if I repeat this same test, am I going to find the same results that they have? And is this going to make sense if we all look at it together as kind of a group of professionals? And if I could tell them any piece of advice to course correct, if they really wanted to turn themselves into a system with true scientific trust, would be to hire a psychometrics PhD to work with you for like 2 months, just to see, like, what does he have to say about your system? Because that's, if I'm going to be honest, it's way beyond me. Psychometrics is, if you want to get into just the math of it, that's its own PhD. I want to be a clinical psychologist, so I'm more interested in the clinical aspect than the math aspect. But it's a lot. It's complicated. And for people who don't even have basic research degrees, psychology or even some of the other life sciences, it's really rough to see their approach to how they think research works when it's not really that defined. Also, technically, for research to be formal and legal, it has to go through the IRB, which is the Institutional Review Board. Right. So technically, the research that they're doing at this point isn't even formal research. And that's to protect human rights and all that. They did that after World War II, I believe.
Yeah. Okay, so just to clarify, and then we'll probably jump to this philosophy point next, but just to clarify, so even if objective personality creates their own group internally, right? Like that's kind of the operator system.
Yeah.
That, to my understanding, they want to create operators where they're trained like under Dave and Shan's metrics or whatever or standard, and then they would want to use that as their measurability. So you're saying even if they were to do that and create their own group of peers, would that not count as?
So the issue there is as soon as you say you want to train your own people to do the system, you're losing your validity, because the validity of science should be that any professional in your general field should be able to pick it up and redo your science without there being an issue. And if you have to train them to see the way that you're seeing, you've lost the validity. You're not going to have that. So for example, almost if you did any type of scientific, specifically psychology research, if you did that study and then handed your exact methods to another person and they could go over it and try to reproduce it, they should be able to get relatively close results without 2 years of training in that specific method of doing it. Because if it requires that, you're adding too much subjective value to your method if it requires 12 months of personal training just to see, that one specific thing.
Mm-hmm. Oh, okay.
And I trust me, I'm a novice when it comes to research methods, but I only have a bachelor's, but I can already tell that like there's some issues here, and I'm sure there's people out there who with much better ways of analyzing this than me. But
Yeah.
from my perspective, these are the issues that I'm seeing.
Yeah, no, it's a valuable perspective. So yeah, so thanks for sharing for sure. So let's do the philosophy. And I think this actually may tie into the hero's journey critiques you have, or do you want to do like which order do you want to do that?
We could do the philosophy thing if you want.
Yeah, I'll start with that.
I don't even remember what I had to say exactly about the hero's journey thing.
So the note I have here was one of your critiques was that like it's not even a critique, it's almost like a saving grace of OP. It's like, hey, they don't need to advertise themselves as a science. It could be more of a philosophy, right?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I actually have a whole video on this topic if you want to hear me talk in detail about it.
Okay, cool.
But the general idea when it comes to personality typology, and this is actually why Jung didn't do research on typology. To him, it was just this system that he created, is because he believed it was something that was much more useful as something that we just use to analyze and kind of instruct humans on the patterns that we're seeing in their behavior. And one of the mottos that I've talked about, you could see it like on my Patreon, and I say it every now and then, is that the prefix psi in psychology doesn't mean mind, it means soul. And all of the old psychologists believed themselves to be people who studied the soul. And I think that when we look at psychology, there's two sides of it. We can study it in like the very Skinner behaviorist method. This is scientific, as hard science as you can be. And then there's going to be psychologists like Carl Jung and Sigmund Freud, who are very much, like this is the science of the soul. And we're kind of trying to figure out what human nature is and how that makes us tick, and the subconscious and all these sorts of things. It's like the idea of the subconscious is something. It's like, how do we scientifically validate that?
Right.
Like, what are we going to do? Maybe one day, but I think typology becomes more useful when you stop trying to treat it as an exact science and look at the general patterns that it's helping people understand. Does this mean that we shouldn't treat it as any science at all? No, but I think there's a middle ground between astrology and, like behaviorism, psychology. Like there's a healthy middle ground there where you're saying, okay, we can observe these patterns repeating themselves in humans. And if we tell people about these patterns, then they can notice them in themselves and others and course correct their own lives and their attitudes based on these things. That's why MBTI is used first and foremost in marriage counseling and business coaching, because it helps people kind of deal with communication and the issues that they're having in regards to themselves and others.
Right. Okay. So yeah, you even if it's not, even if it's not behaviorism, there's still value in the overall patterns of the soul. I mean, this is a huge tangent. I mean, do you believe in like the soul, so to speak? Like what's your stance on that?
I don't want to say I believe in something like that from a religious standpoint, but I would say that I believe in it in like a philosophical standpoint. And this could just be the little FI in me, but I think that each person has their own little core essence of who they are. And that's kind of what differentiates them from someone else. And as someone who's interested in type, I also think of this as maybe the thing that separates you from another person of your same type, is you have your own spark as a human. And, sure, that's not scientific, but to me, I think it's helpful because we see that when we look at people. If we know there's 16 personality types, we know there's way more than 16 types of people. And I think that that's kind of what it's getting at there with the general idea of the soul, or that kind of core essence of humans.
Yeah. Okay. Really cool. And then I would say last but not least, at least with the OP side, you mentioned you had some critiques or just some concerns with like how they present the hero's journey. I generally don't even remember your point here, but like, what was it?
I struggle remembering that too, because I don't remember exactly what I said there.
Well, it was so like, I think I remember the question I asked to prompt this. It was like, what was your stance on their self-growth model, which is the hero's journey, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so when it comes to just the general hero's journey, I think it's something very positive, and Jung was all for the idea of the hero's journey. But I think it goes almost back to what I said earlier about the types being too specific, is that when you lock people into this exact variation of their singular type with not much room for growth, then you find that it's hard for them to grow into a more optimal version of themselves. Or not, I don't want to even say optimal, but a state where they're going to be healthier, happier. It can be easy for someone to get locked into, say, double extroversion and think that's okay. I have an ENTJ that I hang out with frequently, is a very close friend of mine, and I describe him almost as like a TESE ENTJ. He's 18, and it's like, I don't know if that's the best state for him to be in. I think he would find more happiness, health, growth if he delved into that introverted intuition a little bit? And then what would happen if he did? Would he change types in objective personality, or would he still be a TE, SE, INTJ?
Yeah,
Or,
yeah.
that's the weird question there.
Well, I can answer that if you don't mind.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
So my understanding is, so assuming, so obviously we have to take some liberties, right? So let's assume this person was a TESE in the OP system for real.
Yeah. Yeah.
So how it would work in OP is they would actually hyper encourage the NI FI development, both, right? Both the NI and the FI, right? But the caveat is what they would describe. They would say that would be the most painful, like that would be super painful for them, as opposed to someone with TENI where that's autopilot, right? That NI, that narrowing down, especially on a conceptual level, the TESE is going to have a harder time. But that's actually precisely why objective personality would encourage you to grow up, because they do say, hey, you need to balance this out, because if you don't do NI, you're leaving a void of control, like for other people to fill in your life, right? So for example, if he's super chaotic, I'm using a caricature, but if this person is super chaotic, now other people have to come in and be like, hey, you can't do this, you can't do that. Or at the greatest extremes of that, now you have to get into things like detention, prison, where you're literally being boxed in.
Yeah.
Right?
So that's the issue I kind of have with that, is that's exactly what Jung says in Psychological Types, is that like most people are going to start off really favoring that kind of one-sidedness of things, especially when it comes to introversion or extroversion. And then that's why he specifically talks about the auxiliary function as the single most important function to develop, because it exists as that balancing point. Which is why I find that when I type people, especially people who are like the youngest I've typed is 15, and that was really like, wasn't sure about that one entirely. But like 15 to 22, you're going to find that a lot of the times they are very one-sided in their introversion or extroversion. They haven't even begun to develop that tool. And something I've talked about in one of my recent videos was that when we look at type, we think we're automatically good at our auxiliary function. Like we think it's just this thing that we know how to do, when in reality, that's the thing that you have to force yourself to develop. And when that is developed, that's when you become that stable, balanced side of yourself. And you'll see that it becomes easily favorable to you because it's so healthily balancing to your mind. Your mind's going to be like, oh, wow, this isn't like as weird or as bad as I thought it was. When INTJs start using their extroverted thinking, they're like, oh, okay, I can do this. When INFJs start using their extroverted feeling, it's the same way. And I think you might even find the same with the extroverted types who, they start engaging that extroversion, and then they're going to go through pain. When they go inwards, they have to introspect, they have to think about what they're doing, and that's going to hurt them. But after they learn to do that and it becomes more natural, then it's so much healthier for them. And that's the difference between, say, for example, considering yourself a jumper or double introverted, double extroverted type, or considering yourself that type who is currently at the stage of double introversion or double extroversion, who would want to develop over into a more balanced psyche.
Right. Okay. So do you mind if I poke at this a little bit?
Yeah, sure. No, that's fine.
So the recurring premise I'm hearing, and I think this might be something we'll talk about when you talk about MBTI proper. You're saying the auxiliary, you keep saying it. So the auxiliary function is the balancing one. Correct? So that's where you're saying 80% of your focus, 80 to 100% has to be there. Now, my question is, so I'm going to use an INTJ as an example, right? So NITE, right?
Yep.
According to your approach, you would say the TE is the balancer with the external world, which I get. In your experience, though, have you seen people, like specifically INTJs, when they would lean into the TE, would they neglect their FI, or did you not see that as a problem?
Well, specifically with the auxiliary pair is because they're relatively balanced in and of themselves. You're going to find that they're not going to come one without the other. So you have to kind of develop a little bit of both. And if you focus too much of one, you're going to have the issue of ignoring the other. And if you look at the image of Jung's, how he drew the psyche, the two auxiliary functions are the exact same size in their strength in the psyche. So it's like think of the dominant function as pulling 100% into introversion, and the repressed function is pulling 100% into extroversion. And then the two middle ones are kind of like 20, 25, 50% in both direction, where they're pulling a little bit, but they're balanced with each other. It's like a seesaw. And for example, I always tell INTJs who come to me for coaching, if you want your extroverted thinking to work, it has to be FI motivated. where you don't need that with an ENTJ. ENTJs don't need FI motivation to do extroverted thinking because it's repressed. Where, you know, with an ENFP, you might even feel the same way. If you want TE to start working, or if you even find yourself stuck in or not using that introverted feeling in the correct way, engaging in extroverted thinking might be a better way to kind of start using that function pair in and of itself.
Right.
Because it's less of 1, 2, 3, 4, and more so 1, 4, 2, 3 with the functions. You have to treat them as pairs in and of themselves.
Right. That's very fascinating. And I think one of the, you would actually, I don't know how much you've consumed of like OP stuff. I've like consumed other shit. So it's like one of the things, you'd be surprised to hear that like one of the things that Dave and Shan kind of said in passing, I don't think they've emphasized it enough, honestly, but they actually described the middle functions as your superpower. That was one of the things they would say, you know, where they're like, you know, if you want to actually develop, I mean, yes, the bottom one is ultimately the one you need to pull up so that you're not like wrecking your life. But the middle ones are the ones you're naturally going to be the best at, right? So that actually is right in line with
because your dominant's like your operating system. It's just kind of what you do. And I always describe your auxiliary function and even your tertiary as like your tool, like your hammer. You can pick it up to smack it against things. And it starts off as a tiny little wooden stick. And as you develop it, it gains some weight, it gains some power, and you can do more things with it. And then you're going to be able to accomplish more as you develop these functions. But you're not going to be able to do one without the other. So INTJs, ISTJs even who come to me, they're going to be like, how do I get better at TE? It's like, get your FI involved. You know, I didn't go back to college until I had a personal reason to go back to college. I always tell people I was a straight D student. I quit college. I was motivated to go back, and I was a straight A student. The TE kicked in when there was an FI reason to do so.
Really cool. All right, cool. Thanks. Okay. Was there anything before you move on from OP? Is there anything else you want to say, you know, positive, negative, indifferent about OP?
Well, I don't want to just be too negative. So I do think that I want to say that I do think the things that they're attempting to track are really interesting. And I don't remember if I said this before or during, but the idea that, you know, they track the idea of like people versus things. I don't think their entire system is just useless. I just think the methodology is a little bit off, and sometimes they can be very dismissive of other personality type systems. I mean, you know, they talk about the idea that MBTI isn't scientific. Give me one second. But, you know, this entire manual is filled with statistics on how they made the MBTI system and the formal test.
Okay.
This is all actual valid science, peer-reviewed. Everything in here is peer-reviewed. And, you know, there's nothing like that for objective personality. And the way that I see them moving now, I don't see them doing that anytime soon. So it's very hard to hear them talk negatively about the other type systems when they themselves, you know, don't throw rocks when you're in a glass house type of thing.
Right. Okay. Really cool, man. Okay, cool. So let's transition over to MBTI, and then I think we'll finally close out with your actual like channel. So to contrast with OP, so MBTI is kind of, you know, it's basically this progenitor, right? Like that's where OP kind of generated out of. So in that system, you're an INTJ. So that's actually why I use that example. Can you describe, like, because it's been a while for me, like, what does INTJ mean in MBTI terms or Jungian terms? And how do you experience that?
Okay, so, well, we have to differentiate like strict Jungian and then MBTI as well, because I do think that's important as well, because when I type people, I try to like start with their basic Jungian type, which essentially means I'm looking for their dominant function. Because as Jung described type, this is going to be the thing that you're going to usually first notice about someone, unless they're an introverted type, and then they're going to portray that extroverted side, and you might misread them. INTJs get mistyped as ENTJs, INFJs, ENFJs, this type of thing. But in just general being an INTJ, I consider myself a relatively laid back but very focused person. I think with this type and the IJs in general, you're going to see contrast with how they act, because they're usually introverted, but then they engage really quickly and almost harshly at times in the outer world when they have to. And that's something that can be off-putting. It's just like how you see with IPs, how they can be very shy, and then when they go into extroverted perception, they're playful. It's like this very contrasting sense of self. But yeah, where was I going with that? What were you asking? I lost the question.
You, man. Yeah, like how, like, basically describe your experience as an INTJ, both from a Jungian and from a MBTI standpoint.
Okay. So my experience being an INTJ is, I mean, it's just kind of me growing up. Me, just who I am.
Mhm.
I, growing up, was always an extremely solitary child. Always. I had very few friends growing up. But the thing that I noticed that was different versus me versus other people who were generally introverted was I never struggled with social interaction. I wasn't like shy. And maybe when I was like 4 or 5, but I was able to easily kind of just generally communicate with other people, especially when it came to things that I needed to like talk about or ideas. Um, but I was always exceptionally, I had an exceptional preference for being alone. And even now I do. And that's one thing my wife always says about me. It's like, I don't understand how you can sit, alone for 15 hours a day on your computer and not talk to anyone and then be perfectly fine talking to people. And it's just because, I don't know, that's just who I am. That's how I work. I have always been a little bit eccentric. I don't want to like go down too much of the road like special snowflake, INTJ, all that. But I definitely did feel growing up that I stood out from other students and other people, and not always in a good way. Sometimes I felt like it was kind of hard to figure out why I was maybe not meshing with other people or why I always felt like I was standing out. And I think that's a theme that many introverted intuitives might face growing up, especially the NTJs, because they don't have the FE to allow them to easily get along with other people. I was a far underperformer in the first half of my life. I talked about the idea that I was a straight D student. INTJs, I think in my experience, until they develop their extroverted thinking, they tend to get so lost in introverted perception that they don't always accomplish what needs to get done.
Yeah.
So it can be hard for them to kind of live up to the tasks that they want to do, or that's especially if it's expected of them. Because ISTJs, if the SI is there, expectations are usually something they don't mind meeting. But little INTJs are usually brats. They're usually like, no, I don't want to meet other people's expectations. I don't like kind of conforming to these types of things, and I'm going to rebel against that. And I used to get in trouble a lot, but I was never a troublemaker growing up. I don't think I ever got detention once, like ever. But at the same time, I got in trouble for sleeping through class, ignoring schoolwork, reading too much, these types of things. I don't know if that answers your question.
I think it does. Okay, so you're gonna tell me out because I'm so OP like conditioned. Yeah. So MBTI, I mean, you have your dominant, auxiliary, tertiary, and then inferior, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, so you did a great job describing kind of like your dominant. Like, can you describe like your auxiliary and your tertiary, like how you experience those?
Yeah, so this is actually really interesting because I was talking to my INTJ buddy recently about like the differences between how I think about things and how he thinks about them. And to him, the TE is like his primary focus in life. Like he's like, I've got to maximize the efficiency of every single thing I'm doing. I love to order people around if I have the opportunity to. He's 19, not even 19, and he's in a management position at his new job. He's been there for a few months. And I was just like, that's so ENTJ. Like he got in and he climbed as fast as he could. And for me, it's less so about that aspect when I'm engaging in my extroverted thinking. It's more so is like, how can the extroverted thinking support the introverted intuition? Like if I have a thing that I want to do, what's the tool that's going to help me get there? And for me, it's extroverted thinking. And that was the same kind of idea like when I started college again. I had the NI, and you could even say NI-FI vision of being a clinical psychologist. That was decided. So the extroverted thinking kicked in and said, I'm going to organize my entire life to get to this goal. And it doesn't have to be as super maximum efficient as, say, an ENTJ. It just needs to be good enough that it's going to meet my expectations for getting where I need to be. And I think that's the difference between a dominant and an auxiliary function. Is the auxiliary function is it's good enough to get what I need out of it, but I'm not actively thinking about it all the time.
Right. And then the tertiary, it sounds like it's super powerful because, that seemed to be what locked on to, for example, like your career path.
So, yeah. And Jung actually talks about the idea that the tertiary function is going to be super important because he doesn't say tertiary. It's weird how he describes it because aux and tertiary are weird in his system. But that functions in the same attitude as your dominant. So you almost theoretically value it more than your auxiliary function because it's closer to you as an individual and what you prefer. It's just something that's kind of awkward for you. And I always describe in introverts, your tertiary function is private but valued, whereas if you're an extroverted type, your tertiary function is public but awkward. It's like something that you kind of like you wish it was more of kind of who you expressed yourself to be, and you try to express it, but it's not always the best in when you try and do this. And for the introverted types, it's like, I don't want people to see this. Like INFJs, they don't want people to see their TI because then they come off as harsh and it goes against extroverted feeling. INTJs don't want people to see their FI because it goes against how they express themselves through extroverted thinking.
All right. Okay. Really good. And then last but not least, the inferior, like what's that like for you in your life? Like,
so this is probably something you've heard from other introverted intuitives. I've always been a relatively detached person. I describe my life as kind of like shifting through daydreams. Even when I'm doing things, I'm unable to kind of be present. An example I used in one of my recent videos is like every now and then my wife will drag me to a music concert for like bands we like, even bands that I like. And when I'm there, I find myself completely disassociated from the event. It's like I'm living some daydream that's unrelated to the thing, but it's being inspired by, say, the music or the lyrics or something. And I find myself kind of living these imaginary situations. And I live and think in scenarios. And that's hard, maybe be hard for some people to think about. Like before we had this conversation, I played it a few times in my head. I was like, okay, so maybe he's going to ask these questions. And I had, like these hypothetical scenarios playing through my head. And that's how I think about everything. If I'm trying to solve a problem, if I'm trying to fix communication with somebody else, it's in scenarios. And I think that may be just something the introverted perceiving types have. I think I was supposed to talk about the repressed function here. Oh, yeah. So when it comes to my general environment and physical world, I'm bad at this thing. And my wife always tells me that I'm smart and I can do all the things I want, but I'm a terrible human. And not terrible human, terrible at being a human. I'm terrible at being a human. There's a difference. She doesn't get on the FI. She says I'm terrible at being a human because when it comes like doing dishes, washing my own laundry, self-grooming, like you'd be disgusted if you knew how often I brush my teeth because it's not enough. It's not enough. Just the daily routines of life are just not there for me. And it's because these things require so much conscious effort for me. It's like I have to force myself to do the things that other people probably find a little bit more normal in their daily life experience.
So how have you been dealing with that?
I just, as Jung says, don't try to be it, bring it to conscious awareness. So, I try to set these little schedules and routines for myself. And sometimes you have to cheat the system. Like I wanted to start working out. So instead of setting a workout routine for me, because I've tried this many times where I was like, all right, this 30 minutes every day I'm going to work out. I would do it for 3 or 4 days and I'd lose it. Now I have it. So I have the workout equipment sitting in the kitchen. Anytime I go to the kitchen, I do a rep or do a few reps.
You know what? This is a huge tangent. This is James Clear talk. You know James Clear?
I don't. Sorry.
Okay. No problem. So James Clear he's known for he's like the habits guy. So he like writes a lot about habits. He's consulted a lot about habits. He has his website. It's like he's the habits guy. Like that's how he's been branding himself lately. In the OP system at least, right? I don't know about MBTI yet. In the OP system, he has NIT. So he's an INTJ. INTJ with blast sleep. And his whole thing is you need to do these little micro habits. And so over time, you start stacking the habits to basically trick your body to do it, as opposed to brute force. Yeah. Yeah.
And that's kind of how I approach all the things that I kind of have to force myself to do. And as I mentioned with the workout routine, now every time I walk into the kitchen, I do a rep of 10 or 20 exercises. And over the course of the day, that's about what I would do in a 20-minute workout. So maybe it's not optimal, but
No, this is interesting. So you came up with that on your own. Yeah, see, that's what's fascinating to me, because you weren't exposed to James Clear's work, but you guys came up with the same thesis basically.
I struggle listening to motivational people because I'm usually a self-motivated person, and I find that those types of things don't do a whole lot for me. Mm-hmm. When I'm trying to learn something new, I try to watch other people who have done it super successfully, and maybe I try to look at their methods for it. Like when I wanted to start my YouTube channel and I was deciding to switch from being just a casual content creator to someone who's doing it full time, I went and watched a ton of videos of people like Think Media and all these other YouTube channels who teach YouTube. And to me, it was, as long as I have the method for doing it, then I can develop my own style for using that method.
Right. Well, let me ask you a question. This is a huge tangents at this
You're
point.
fine. I don't mind the tangents, man.
Yeah. No. Okay. Okay. So based on that, so assuming you and James Clear are both INTJs, right? Do you feel like, have you ever, I mean, how often do you encounter other INTJs, whether it's through your typing sessions or just in real life, where you guys spontaneously come up with the same processes or conclusions?
A little bit. I've actually met more INTJs than probably you're going to see out in like public through my typing sessions, because I feel as an INTJ and someone who calls themselves one who does these sessions, they come to me maybe to verify that they are one, or if they feel that way. And I find that a lot of them will share similar struggles to what I've had. And when we talk about specifically in coaching, like, hey, what have you maybe started doing to ameliorate this or deal with this? Then they'll give me solutions where it's like, oh, I could see how I would have come up with that type of solution, or how, you know, that could work if I were to do it.
Okay, really cool. Yeah. That's interesting. So okay, cool. So let's see here. Look at my notes. Oh, sorry. One last thing before we move on from the MBTI. So going back to the scenarios, right? So the scenarios playing out in your head. So one thing you mentioned to me in the prep was you said you need to work on your DE function in order to communicate the inner imagery.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you look crazy, basically. I mean,
yeah, and actually, I did a video on this because that when we had that talk, I was like, I need to talk more about this. So I think that's one thing. You can see it specifically in Carl Jung's chapter on introverted intuition, specifically, is where he talks about the idea that if the introverted intuitive doesn't develop their auxiliary judging function, they're going to be like a man alone in the woods crying out with no one to hear him. And it's because specifically with the IJs, even the ISTJs and the ISFJs, if they don't learn to communicate their inner perceptions, they're not going to make sense, because introverted or subjective and irrational is the most abstract you can get. Even SI, it's the most abstract you're going to get as a function. So if you want to communicate that into something that can be understood by others, what better way than to go to the opposite side of that spectrum, objective rationality, extroverted thinking or feeling, both of them rational functions, which is why you find that IJs are usually not as skilled in the type of expression that IPs are. So IJs typically are better at maybe writing or speaking, whereas IPs tend to be better at the arts or music, these types of things, because that's extroverted or objective irrationality. They're not rationalizing it, they're turning it into something else, essentially. They're changing its form and expressing it.
Yeah, I mean, how do you? I mean, obviously, your YouTube channel almost speaks for itself as to how well you're doing communicating it. But like, from an experiential standpoint, like, how are you? Like, do you feel like you're able to get everything in here out?
Not everything, and I think that's one of the issues that the IJs face, is that their inner perceptions feel very private to them. So sharing them feels exceptionally vulnerable, and that's why I think they feel comfortable turning it into something rational. Now, that's an issue with intuitives, because it's hard to even begin to rationalize an intuitive process. Like when I walk up to someone and I don't like them, and I don't even fully understand yet why I don't like them, but like something in my mind is just like, something's not right here. How do I tell that to someone else? Like, what's the logic behind I don't like this person? And then depending on their type, it's going to be a whole different scenario. Like if they're high FE type, they're going to be like, what do you mean you don't like them? Like, you know, I run into those types of situations quite frequently, where it's like, I have a perception and it's like, I don't have the words for it, or like, what are the words to give to this thought, feeling, perception, whatever, to help someone else maybe understand what I'm seeing. And it's kind of like a roadblock that's pretty frequent.
Wow. I don't experience that too. I mean, well, yeah, because like even in your system, even if I'm a standard ENFP, right, and MBTI, it's like the inner, like that'd be the SI for me in my case. So it's like either way, it's the bottom. So it's like I'm not.
Yeah. Well, extroverted perceiving types like NE or SE feel that negativity when they're not allowed to express their perceptions, because to them they're not private, they're shared. They're public, and if they are forced to keep them within, or people tell them that they're not allowed to, or that they're crazy, that's when they feel stress, when they're not allowed to express that side of themselves.
Interesting. Okay, cool. So thanks for sharing that. So before we jumped, and this is probably going to be now we're gonna just start talking about just like your business and your sessions and stuff like that. Before we do that, is there anything else you want to say about MBTI, whether it's for the group or just anything that you think we've missed?
Read Gifts Differing if you want to learn what real MBTI is.
Gifts Differing by
Gifts Differing. Briggs herself. It's the original source material on the Myers-Briggs system. If you want no nonsense Myers-Briggs and you want to really understand how it works, it's a really easy to understand book, and I would recommend it to anyone who's starting their journey in type.
Okay, really cool. All right, so Gifts Differing. Okay, good. All right, so last but not least, let's talk about you. Okay.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so let's start with the YouTube channel. Like, I'm fascinated by the YouTube channel just because I'm doing one myself. We kind of know why you started it. I am curious as to like, why is it performing as well as it is, just given the topic, and like, how are you feeling about that?
I feel pretty good. So my channel started out very, very niche. Like, it started out as an exclusively MBTI channel. And as I went to college and I got my psych degree, I was like, I want to branch out and do more than just MBTI. That's hard because I always find that when I publish videos that aren't type related, they get far less views. Occasionally I'll have one good one that's, 1,000 views or whatever. People primarily come to my channel for type, but as I continue to grow, I'm going to be expanding whether people want to see that content or not, just because it's going to get to that point where I feel like I need to. But what was the initial question? I lost. I do that all the
time. Okay, so the initial question was your YouTube channel. Like, why do you feel like it's performing so well? You said there was some niche channel, some niche video.
Because when I watched like Think Media, I mentioned that channel, and I watched all those people who are like, this is how you grow a YouTube channel. These are the kind of methods for doing it. A lot of the things they talked about was you want to niche down, but you don't want to niche down too hard. And this is no offense to like your method or for anyone else in the objective personality community, but those people are niched down so hard that your content is only going to be a fraction of what OP's ever is. And since they're only at, say, 44,000, if you stick within just objective personality, that's your limit. That's your height. You're not going to go higher than them if you just stick to that content. So you have to find the balance between niching down into a topic and where that niche can meet other topics that are comfortable or healthy related to it, which is why I talk about MBTI and self-growth, or MBTI and personality disorders, or something along those lines.
Wow. Man, this is going to be hard for me because, yeah, it's like, as you've seen, it's like right now I'm exclusively OP, right? Man.
I didn't mean to throw a bomb on you there.
No. I mean, it's I've had, so funny story. I've actually had conversations with a really close friend of mine where it's like they gave me like almost like exactly the same feedback. They're like, Reggie, like, this is not scalable, basically, was the notion, right? And their solution was, I need to switch fields entirely, right? And so this is super selfish, like consulting time, like, given the current starting points, like how, so if you're super niche, like how would you grow without overextending?
Well, let's say, for example, if you started with OP, you could either start interviewing people within the realm of just typology in general. Like for me, you have me on here and I'm not exactly an OP type person, because then you branch out your audience, but you could also branch out into general psychology kind of people in general. I know Dr. Dario Nardi, for example, well, he's done interviews with like everyone in the community. I don't know if you've already met
I have not. I have not reached out to him. No, this is important.
Like he's done one with like 5 or 10 people. Those types of people, especially if you want to do like podcasts and stuff, find people who are kind of interested in the same things that you are interested in talking about. And then maybe this is hard for some types, but you have to really define what you want your channel to be. And like, maybe this is just as an NI, it's like, I know what I want my channel to be. It's just kind of the steps to get there are very difficult. And as an NE type, maybe you're more comfortable with being experimental and trying out new things.
It's fascinating. So this is me nerding out. I actually feel like I know what the steps are, by the way. That's like, I don't know what I want it to be yet, but I know the steps. Like, I have been studying fucking Gary Vee. Like, that's why I'm posting Gary Vee all the time in the fucking group. Sorry, I'm getting triggered.
Maybe it's like the NETE there. It's like, you got the steps, you just haven't singled down to the vision yet.
I'm trying to tell you guys, the solution's right there. I'm posting that shit. It's not arbitrary. It's right there. Okay. But yes, you're right. That's been an insecurity of mine of what I want the channel to be long term. But really, thank you so much. I am actually going to reach out to Dario Nardi after this, and hopefully I can get him on here. But yeah, I might talk to you about that offline. But going back to you, right? Sorry for this. So that was my any. That was my any, guys. So going back to you. So let me look at these notes real quick, just in the interest of time. So one thing you mentioned was, because there's like some videos on your channel that are like hundreds of thousands of views, right? If I'm not mistaken.
I've got like one with like 450,000. It's my first INTJ overview video. That one skyrocketed. And that's the general thing about YouTube in general, is if you can get one of those videos, like just a single one of those videos, you'll get to the point where you can be known. Because that was the video that brought me from like 500 to like 2,000 in like 3 months. And once you hit 2K, I always tell people that 1,000 is a proof of concept. If you can have 1,000, you can have 100,000. If you can have 100,000, you can have 1,000,000. And that's it. Just get to that point where you have that, because if you look at statistics, there's going to be at least a few million other people like the 1,000 that are subscribed to you. You just have to find them or get them attracted to your content.
That's so fucking smart. Thank you. We're gonna talk after this.
Sure, no problem. I don't mind.
Okay, this is good shit. Okay, now, but why do you feel like the like that one hit big? Let's start with that one.
This could just be FI here, but I always, when I do my videos, I try to be as authentic and honest as possible, and that's the thing that I really want almost to portray in my YouTube channel, is I want it to be about my ideas in an authentic way.
Okay.
So if I feel like when I try to present my content, maybe people see that I'm being realistic with them. I'm not trying to sell them something. I'm not trying to lie about them or lie to them about something. I'm not trying to teach them that I'm right. I'm just telling them my opinions and letting them know, even if you disagree, that's fine. Tell me that you disagree. That's something I always tell people in the comments or the ends of my video, is like, let me know in the comments if you disagree, because I want to know. This is a two-way street. It's not just me telling you that I'm right. And I think that's an issue that we see a lot in the type community in general. We just see people who kind of want to rampage and bulldoze over other people's opinions and ideas. And I don't think that's healthy when you have a scientific mind or a scientific community, is you want to be able to have people share ideas.
Yeah. Wow. So you think that, so you're saying that authenticity is what you feel like people just wanted to watch, that is basically.
I don't think that's why they come to my channel. I think maybe they come to the channel for the ideas, but I think that's an additional factor.
Okay.
Like, and again, that could just be the FI. That could just be like, I think people, maybe they see that, maybe I'm proud of that or something. I don't know. But to me, I think that's what I hope people see, at least. And people come to me all the time, family, friends, people on my Discord channel, make an MBTI meme video, make a this and that video. And it's like, no, I will not, because it is not representative of what I feel I should be doing or what I want to present on my channel. And I'm not going to do these things, and you won't ever find me doing them. I'm going to follow my path and get to where I want to be, using the path that I've laid out for myself.
Meanwhile, I just opened up a TikTok account yesterday.
No, there's nothing wrong with that. I'm selfish about the way I do things because I want them to be my way, and that could just be my little IJ, like, don't control me thing. But then I always, if you're an ENFJ or an ESFJ and you want to have a channel where you're very open and happy and you want to do funny content, all this type of stuff, go right ahead. Do the stuff that makes you happy and just be the most you that you can be. And then people who are like you, or just like you in general, will be drawn to you, I think.
Yeah, no, really good. Okay, so for the YouTube channel, I know you have some goals. Do you mind sharing what your current goals for the YouTube channel are?
Yeah, so I'm behind on my goals currently. My 2020 goal was to get to 20,000 subscribers, my 2020 goal. But 2020 was the year of the Rona, so things changed. But other than that, right now, my number one goal in life is to get into a PhD program. YouTube is second for me. I want to do my YouTube. And YouTube growth is nice, but I'd like to scale up my coaching business to, well, I don't want to say scale up, but just, get more clients, live sustainably, and then get my channel to a point where maybe I can kind of just live comfortably. At the point I'm at now, I'm like almost paycheck to paycheck living as a YouTuber and a personality coach, but, a little bit more than I have now, and I'd be good to go. And I'm a pretty simple person. As long as I have that and I can get into a PhD program and follow my dreams, then I'll be satisfied. whatever happens with the channel happens. If I grow to be 100,000, sure. I mean, that is a goal. I want my silver play button one day. I've set on it, but that's not like.
Wait, what's the silver? What's that?
100,000 subscribers. If you get that on YouTube, they send you a silver plaque play button.
Oh, cool.
You didn't know that? Yeah, you get.
I think. I mean, I knew they sent you stuff. Like I know the gold one.
Gold is 1 million, and then diamond's 10 million.
So there's a diamond one.
Yeah, and then there's ruby at 50 million. But only like 3 people have it. But silver is the 100,000, and that's where I'd like to get. One day.
You just activated the TE.
Yeah, you're like, ooh, achievements.
Yeah. Validation.
I love achievements.
Validation. Okay, really good. So next let's talk about the typing sessions and that you're doing, and then we'll close out with your actual your PhD path. So let's do the type sessions first.
Sure.
Did you do the typing session before your YouTube or after? Like, what was the?
I started with YouTube, then I went and got certified.
Okay, was that always the plan, or was that how did that happen?
It wasn't the plan. It just kind of happened. I didn't even know there was a certification course, and I'm going to be honest with you. The certification course isn't what makes me the kind of personality type I am. That's just kind of extra TE credentials to add to the list, because they don't spend a whole lot of time in the one-on-one interview process, and that's exclusively how I type now. I don't even use the formal assessment anymore. One, because it costs people a lot of money just to get that assessment, and two, I don't think it helps any more than me talking with people. Because if I talk with them, instead of just giving them a test, I can give them my knowledge and understanding of why I think they're a certain type, instead of the test just doing it for them.
Mm-hmm. Okay, really cool, man. Okay, so here's I have a few questions. Thank God. So when you're doing your typing or typing actually,
I do coaching as well. Yeah.
What are you looking for? No, but to determine someone's type, what are you actually looking for?
Okay.
Yeah.
So the way I have my typing sessions set up is we start out with 20 to 40 minutes of me asking them some really kind of basic questions, like stuff that if you've taken an MBTI test, you've heard these types of things before. Mm-hmm. And what I'm looking for is not their answers. The answers are almost they don't matter half the time. It's the way in which they answer and what they value when they're answering those questions. Mm-hmm. So for example, one question, this is, of course, none of them are going to be 100% deterministic, and that's why I have a bunch of questions. But one question I like to ask people to see if maybe they have extroverted feelings somewhere in their function stack is, are you comfortable showing people your emotions if you want to? Mm-hmm. And that's the kind of question where, if you find that they really shy away from that, then it's like, all right, there's a decent chance they might not be on that extroverted side. Or maybe they're an INTP or ISTP with a really bad extroverted feeling or really repressed extroverted feeling. And then you have to ask them, okay, so you don't like doing this. How much of a stressor is it for you? Does it make you angry? Does it upset you? And what I'm really looking for is the dominant and repressed function, the original young 8 types. And then from there, I try to figure out what the auxiliary function is. Now, because it's not a strict method, sometimes the auxiliary function or the tertiary function or just one function in general will stand out to me immediately. I'll just start asking them questions and I'm like, holy mother of TI, this person's got a lot of that. And, that'll be the thing that I kind of have to work around when deciding their type. And sometimes you just narrow down from there to find their type. Yeah. But I haven't met many people that I've really struggled with typing. And if they are someone that I've really struggled with typing, it's more of a cultural thing usually. I worked with a young man from Japan once who was really hard to type because there's a lot of cultural difference between America and Japan. Or when I work with some Europeans, there's some difference there because they're generally more introverted than America. And you have to take into account these types of things.
Okay, really good. In the interest of time, I'm going to ask one more question about your sessions, typing or coaching. Okay. And then we'll finish up with your PhD path, right? Mm-hmm. So in your coaching sessions, what are your goals? So actually with both, really, typing and coaching session, what are your goals? I know you mentioned you there's a way you want your clients to frame things after they're done. Can you just elaborate on what your mission statement is or what your goals are when you do these?
When I do coaching specifically?
Let's start with coaching specifically, yes.
Okay, so my goals when it comes to coaching and working with a client is to help them reframe their own issues through the lens of personality type, assuming we know their type, which is why I prefer it when people, when they buy a session, or if they're going to get coaching from me, they do a typing session and then a coaching, which is why I have a little bundle. But someone can come to me with just they just want to buy a coaching session and we can assume their type. But I say that that's on you. Like if you want to come to me and assume you're an ENTJ, we're going to frame all of your problems through the lens of you being an ENTJ. And you have to take that and go on with that information on your own. But really, it's just, if you can understand why you're having the issues you're having, or maybe what's lacking in that area, you're going to be able to better understand how to go about changing that. And you'll find that people who buy coaching, this is the number one thing they'll ask for, especially TE types, or what's a piece of advice or steps you can give me to get better? And it's like, I can't do that for you. I can't tell you what to do. Like if you come into coaching, it's not just going to be me telling you, do this and everything's going to be great. It's going to be like, how are you thinking about this? Is something going to change if you think about it in this other, perspective? What do you think you're doing wrong? These types of things. And then you have to develop the steps on your own. I can't tell you what's FI important to you, for example. How do I know what I should do with my life? I can't tell you. Just if something is interesting to you, follow that thread for a while. See where that leads you, and you'll be able to make some change from that. But if you're going to ignore all the signals and flags that come up in your life and not chase anything that seems interesting or important to you, you're never going to change and you're going to be stuck where you are now. So it's these kinds of mindset changes that I try to get people to have when they come into my coaching sessions.
Right. Wow. And I mean, and you offer both personal and business coaching, right?
Yes. So I took career development as one of my core classes, and I understand the basics of helping people decide maybe what careers are going to be good for them. I also talk about things like personality and career best fit, these types of things, congruity. But a lot of the times people who come to me for business coaching do it because they want to talk about MBTI problems related to their business. Like I'm having trouble communicating with my boss, or I'm unsure how I can scale my business larger based on my personality type. These sorts of things are usually the problems that people come to me for.
Yeah. But you still are doing the reframe thing, right?
A lot of the times. Sometimes I will give them steps or practical advice if I can think of something, within the 1 hour of me knowing them, based on their problem. But that's a lot of the times you can find that if you just help them reframe their own problems and they have that new perspective, they'll be inspired to make and take those steps themselves. And sometimes you'll find that when people buy coaching sessions, all they really want to do is talk and voice their opinions, and they don't have someone to do that with. And being able to, in therapy and counseling, there's the process of active listening, which is an entire class. If you want to get into counseling, you have to take an entire class to learn how to listen to people. And that's important because if you know how to meaningfully listen to people, hear what they're saying and mirror back that's important and that you're really listening to them, they're going to feel understood and they're going to feel like they can make positive changes in their life because someone understands them and now they have a new perspective on that.
Okay, really cool, man. Thank you. So last but not least, it's actually probably most important, really.
Okay.
This is the FI goal, man. So talk to us about that, man. You said you're going for the PhD. You said clinical psychology, right?
Yeah, clinical psychology. I want to work specifically with schizophrenia and dissociative disorders. I can't talk today. But in general, I'm also interested in working with kind of general personality disorders, these types of things. I'm working on a study right now. My professor switched universities, so I don't get to be there in person anymore, which really sucks. But I'm still on the co-writing team. We're working on a study on social anxiety, and you might have even seen Lijo. She did a video on this recently, social anxiety and interpretation bias.
Yeah.
I'm doing an exact study on that topic right now with a mentor, PhD mentor.
Wait. Don't tell me you told her.
I don't know. I asked her, I was like, because she's in my Discord, but I don't know. I don't have any proof or anything for that. She might have seen me talk about it or something, but that doesn't matter either way. It's not like I own the topic.
No. I was gonna tease her so hard. It's like, oh, okay, I see you just blasting back what he told you.
No. I talk to Lijo every now and then. She's a very chill person.
No, I know. I'm teasing.
Anyway,
yeah.
What was I talking about? Oh yeah, we're working in that study. So the one thing that I'm missing from my portfolio for getting into a PhD program is a publication, because I was a straight A student, 3.98 GPA on graduation, top 10% in the senior exam. I was a teaching assistant for 4 semesters. I have all these TE credentials under my belt, but I don't have a publication. So 2 years in a row, I've failed to get into a PhD program. I've gotten quite a few rejection letters back. But that's not discouraging me because that's my goal. I'm not giving up on it either way. So all I need to do now is work with my professor, get a publication under my belt, maybe even 2, reapply next year, hopefully have better luck. And in the future, work with people who have more severe mental illnesses. And I think, unfortunately, that means I'll probably step away from type later in my life, or not completely away, but there's a good chance that maybe you won't find me doing type sessions in 10 years, or you won't find me doing the same types of coaching sessions. But that really just kind of depends on where life takes me.
Right, how things play out, right? Now, you mentioned you wanted to be not only a clinical psychologist, but a research practitioner. What is that?
So when you go to a PhD program, there's usually 3 different types of models. There's a strict researcher model, which is someone who's going to be like a psychometrics major, like I discussed earlier. If you just want to be involved in the numbers of research, that's kind of what you're going to go for. There's people who generally go for practitioner-only routes, although there's a thing in psychology called a PsyD instead of a PhD, and it's 1 year shorter, and it's designed for people who only want to do clinical psychology practice and no research. And then you can get a PhD as a researcher practitioner model, which is you want to do about 50-50 on the research and practicing side of things. And that's what Jung was, although Jung was a psychiatrist. But back then, psychiatrists and psychologists were like pretty much the same thing back in like 1910. Sure. But essentially, I would like to do research, but at the same time work with clients and have that subjective and qualitative understanding of the topics as well. Because I don't think you can understand people completely through numbers alone. And I feel like if you really want to understand the suffering someone's going through, you have to talk to them one-on-one. You have to really see their perspective. Right. And that's going to help you form better ways of helping people like them.
Yeah. Wow. And it sounds like you're enjoying the journey so far.
Yeah, I like it. I wish I could be in school because I've been out of school. I graduated in December of 2019, and I took 2 master's level classes just to get some extra letters of recommendation and work with a few professors, but I'm bored, honestly. I'd love to be back in school, but I just need to get into a program.
Nice. Wow. Yeah, so really interesting guy. So I would say, I don't know if I have anything else. I'm just looking through if I skipped anything, because I did skip some shit.
That's fine. I'm plugging my headset real quick. I'm running out of battery. It'll look goofy for a second. My SE is failing me. Oh.
Yeah. Okay, I think I have one last question. It's circling back to something, and then we'll probably close up.
Sure.
So, and this is super selfish for me. So when you started the YouTube channel, you eventually had the business side, right?
Yeah.
Like, what was that transition like for you? Right? Like, what was it like building the business, both from a personal, emotional, and then also from like a practical, operational perspective?
Difficult. So after I got certified initially, I started doing typing sessions kind of like semi-professionally. Like, I just kind of was like, I'm going to try it and see if anyone bites the line here. And, I maybe would have one person every now and then, but things really started to grow when I started to kind of incorporate my business into my YouTube channel and have them as kind of like coexisting, which is why at the end of every video, I do a small shout out about my website or my typing services. And that's what kind of made it much easier to mesh those 2 things together. For me, because I enjoy doing the typing and the coaching sessions, it doesn't really feel like it's a separate entity. It feels like I'm a YouTuber who also does coaching and typing. Right. Yeah. Did that answer the question?
I think so. Let me just check my notes, because I think there was something.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, so there was something you mentioned in our prep where you said there was NIQity. Do you remember what that was?
Oh, Acuity, maybe?
NIQity, or something like that. There was like
it the scheduling service, maybe? Is that what
yeah. You told me about that, and I was like,
oh yeah. So Acuity, ACUITY.
Okay.
Acuity is a program that I use. It's for people who are like starting their own businesses. It's a scheduling service. And you just pay like $10 or $15 a month, and then people can book all their sessions and stuff with you through there. And then, for example, when someone books a session with me, it puts it in my time log, emails and notifies me, generates a Zoom link, and automatically emails it to them, and then I meet them that day. Like, I don't have to do anything. It's they pay, it does it, good to go.
Yeah.
And that takes a lot of work off my TE, because then it's just like I can focus on the things I have to be doing when 90% of my work is automated.
Yeah. Yeah, okay, so that's why I took that. I literally took that note because it's like I'm like, oh my god, I'm such an observer. I'm like, oh my gosh, I need something like this.
Yeah, I recommend that for someone, especially you low TE types. You know, having something that automates your business.
Yes, please.
That's going to be a lifesaver.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so the last thing, and this is more, I guess, on a serious note, you mentioned how like you have the content, but sales and marketing is your biggest challenge. Like, why is that?
Well, for one, I don't like seeming like a type businessman, which is for me, I always try to make it appear like, and this is because how it is for me, that my content and what I'm saying is more important than the sales side of it. And I feel like that's backwards with a lot of the type YouTubers that I see. And I'm not talking about anyone in particular, just a lot of them in general. You kind of see that they're businessmen first, who then talk about type as their method of getting business. And for me, I want to be a psychology enthusiast first, who has a business about helping people and doing typing sessions. So I don't like to overly present myself when it comes to these things. And even just at the beginning of every video, I have a little pop-up that comes up for 5 seconds that's like, support my work on Patreon. And that's cringy to me. It's like, oh man, like I wish I didn't have to do that. But like, if people don't know about my Patreon, how are they ever going to support me on Patreon?
Yeah.
So I don't know why that's uncomfortable for me.
No, that's so interesting. I'm not judging it. I guess I'm just fascinated. So as you know, like I think I've probably mentioned this like 5 times already. I'm into Gary Vee right now. Guys, I'm trying to tell you, it's just hype, okay? But like, so a lot of his stuff, I mean, is almost exclusively about branding and marketing, right? And so, so before I go into my little kind of spiel, it's like, so you mentioned, like, what specifically about it? Is it literally like what is it about being a businessman first that's kind of problematic?
It's not that I don't want to be a businessman. It's that I hate the idea of being a sellout.
Okay.
And maybe that's like an FI thing as well, where it's like I don't want it to push so far in the direction that people think that I've lost my value or like what I originally wanted to do for my vision with my business. Okay. And that's why it's why like I only charge $80 for a typing session, which is lower than like almost everyone out there. And it's because I've been at that price for a long time, and I don't feel like it's fair to charge more than that. And I've thought, I was like, I could easily up it to 100, 150, and I'm sure people would still buy it. But because I don't want to be that type of person, I want to give people the value that I think is authentic and fair. I try to keep it at that. Now, maybe one day, I'll raise it if I really need to, or I really want to or something. But I just try to stick to that side of myself. I try to allow that to be what's represented in my business.
Okay, so here's my Gary Vee TE tip, okay? And then I'll stop because this is my FI right now.
Yeah.
So one of the things he talks about in terms of branding, so branding and sales are different, right?
Yeah.
Sales is when you're asking for the thing. Branding is building the reputation so that people ask you for the thing.
Yeah.
Right? So that's kind of the core difference. Now, he recommends, like, in order to maximize your brand, you do need to, like, almost yell about yourself on as many social platforms as possible. But the way you're yelling is you're giving out the best of your content for free or as close to free as possible.
Yeah, that's what they talk about on Think Media as well. And they may have even worked with the guy you're talking about, because I think I've seen him on there as well. Okay. And that's the general idea behind why I don't pay gate any of my YouTube videos. There's not a single paywall, pay gate, anything. It's because this is my content, and I will allow it to stand as a testament for my competency as a practitioner. So I don't have an issue with like general branding in that sense. I just don't like the idea of like overly marketing myself.
Okay. So that's So that's my FI.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
Yeah, as long as you're vibing with it. All right, we good. All right, so that's about it. Closing thoughts? Is there any closing thoughts you would like to share with
No, just if you haven't seen my channel, maybe go check it out. If you're interested in working with me to find your type, you can check out my website, AsuraPsych.com. Or if you have any questions about it, feel free to shoot me an email at AsuraPsych@gmail.com. I'm usually willing to answer preliminary questions about typing sessions if you want to know more.
Nice. Okay, really good. So, Chris, really appreciate it. I'm going to do my little bylaws, okay? And then we'll just get the hell out of here.
Yeah.
So, guys, he already go to his website. Just go to his YouTube channel. Don't make him have to tell you twice, okay? Next, okay, I'm still trying to tell you, game night, March 13th, come join us, okay? I know you don't have shit to do on a Saturday evening, okay? 12 to 3 p.m. Eastern, 6 to 9 p.m. Eastern. There's also a Google form for you to RSVP. Please join us. Also, come catch these hands in Super Smash Brothers. Make sure you get your booty whooped at our upcoming tournament. We're also going to live stream that. Okay. Finally, guys, and this is not against Chris. If you have a thumbs down against me personally because you're a fucking hater, go ahead and do that. Put a thumbs down. If you liked it, put a thumbs up. Both help me with the algorithm, guys. So go ahead and put 50 thumbs downs. But then also leave a comment. I read all my comments. I'm also doing my best to reply to all my comments. And then, hit subscribe so you can get the notification. I'm going to go to San Francisco like around Wednesday. So I will still be posting clips, but I won't have any other interviews this week. But starting next week, I'm going to start back up the interview episode schedule. You're going to really enjoy it. Much like this one. I thought this was a really meaningful conversation, so we won. Okay. So that's it. Chris, really appreciate it, man. Everyone in the live chat is, special shout out. I think Nick was like here for a little while. So shout out to you, Nick, with the guitar. Shout out to Sheila. Okay, and shout out to Simeon, I think.
I did want to respond to Simeon because he said ENFP mentor. The mentor who gave me that chat and convinced me to go to college was an ENFP. So that's just happy coincidence that you mentioned that. So
nice. And then finally, I don't know who this is, but hey, girl, good to see you. All right, thank you guys all so much, and I will see you on the next one. Take care.